Okay, hi everyone. This is my great pleasure to have Stefano here with me. And this is a follow-up to his excellent talk in our DEB seminar, which if you have not listened to yet, I highly recommend you to watch and listen to. And Stefano, thank you for finding the time to be with me here. And as I said, this is the follow-up to this talk, so I will proceed right to the first question. What are the main implications of your findings?
Yeah, first of all, Yefim, thanks a lot for organizing the seminar in the first place and also giving the opportunity to these interesting, overcomplicated questions, but maybe not the first one. So the first one, you asked the main implications of our findings. So first of all, maybe let's start by summarizing very briefly what are our main findings. What we studied is the impact of feedback, so the impact of experience in decision making under risk. It's been standardly implemented by decision among lotteries. And the key finding is that while feedback does have an impact in risk preferences, it does so in a way that is not consistent with a learning process, and it is not consistent to a bias correcting process. So I would say that the most important implication of our finding is that we show, or let's say we challenge the idea that experience, in particular experience through feedback learning, can be used as a way to debias, as a way to improve optimality and rational decision making. And of course, this is challenging because it is often, for example, by people in the adaptive rationality line of research, it is often assumed that apparent irrational behavior can disappear as soon as you give samples, you give information to the participants, and can revise their beliefs. Well, our findings challenge this very assumption.
This is very interesting. And what is your finding related also to when there is description or only when you speak about learning, so only pure experience?
Yeah, so our finding is really at the interface between these two worlds or these two paradigms, because we started by a described decision-making paradigm, concretely decision-making about between uh, probabilistic lotteries, and we added on the top of this description-based paradigm feedback to see precisely what was the impact of this, feedback information, this experience, trial by trial experience, into the preferences originally elicited in the description manner. So essentially, our study is part of this line of research, which is also present in our lab, however new, but it's also been present in the work of many other people, including Ido Erebrath, etc., to try to bridge these two decision-making modalities, right? And I think again the interesting idea is that we found that the bridge between these two modalities it's compared to what expected. It is not necessarily mediated by a learning process. And on top of that, it is also radically affected by the way of the quantity of the feedback that has been provided to the participants. Because to be, maybe if I can unpack a little bit the results, we contrasted two different regimen of feedbacks, namely partial feedback and complete feedback. And we found that the both type of feedback has an impact, however, not necessarily through the same psychological mechanism.
And sometimes feedback can also lead you not toward expected value maximization, but in the opposite direction. This also happens in some situations, right?
Yes, exactly. So in our case, I think what we found was pretty clean in the sense that it was not steering away from maximization, but not either increasing the maximization. But since, and that's maybe was one of the good characteristic of our design, we could actually independently assess the effect of feedback on risk preferences and maximization. We found that the effect was orthogonal in respect of maximization. More concretely, if we can push a little bit more description of the results, we found that the feedback is the propensity to see, so make subject actually less risk averse, but did so in a way that was not dependent on maximization, or let's say has no impact on maximization. So essentially, feedback decreased maximization in the case in which the optimal response was the safe response, and conversely, it increased maximization when the optimal response was the risky response.
That's very interesting. I think it's somewhat related. Are you familiar with Eldad's loss attention not paradigm, his findings? I think it's somewhat related what you are saying
Yeah,
to.
I didn't think about that, but now that I'm mentioning is you are referring to YAKM results about the fact that the losses can increase the engagement of the participants
Exactly.
in the task. What could be that feedback it is also acts as a form of increasing the engagement of the subject. But surely what we found was that it changed. We call it the attitude, or you can call it the mindset toward the decision making process. And we think that the key idea is that feedback is not modifying preference through experience, but is creating a different experience of the task, which is a task in which you don't only have your decision, but you also have to process the subsequent feedback, which create a different mindset in the, or elicit, not create probably, but it elicit a different mindset in the mind of the participants that therefore changes preferences.
I see. That's very interesting. And what is your opinion, or how do you plan to extend your this research, or how do you suggest to
Yes,
others
so
to extend it?
the first, sorry, no, no, that's also a very important question. So in the first study, we were quite descriptive. So we ran 7 experiments and we reanalyzed previous data sets because we wanted to be certain about precisely the robustness and the reproducibility of the behavioral basic results. But as I said, this first study remained to some extent descriptive. The next step is to translate this observation into a mechanistic computational model of the effect of feedback in risk preferences. And this is definitely will also leverage on a more closer or more deeper analysis of what is the existing literature concerning modeling these kind of processes. So this is one important line of development for this finding. And the other extension will concern to see to which extent the results that we observed are stable or are even affected by individual differences. So a study for which we already have some preliminary results in collaboration with the Professor Azzurra Ruggeri in Munich concern, for example, assessing the developmental time course. So we have tested children and adolescents in the same paradigm, and we are starting observing interesting threads. I will not disclose much these results because they are still needed to be replicated, but definitely we are going to invest on this. And something that we've also wanted to invest is to try to do, as we recently have done for another paradigm, try to leverage on an intercultural cognitive network of collaborators and try to test the stability of the results across countries. Because as you know very well, risk preferences are something that are quite substantially affected by the cultural makeup of the participant. Here, cultural makeup is broadly understood, like belonging to a community, a nation, and maybe a socioeconomic strata, etc., etc. But there is, virtually, to my knowledge, no intercultural study of what is the effect of feedback on risk preferences. And thanks to our collaborator, we would like to deploy this kind of study to have a better understanding of this process outside the relatively limited typical population of psychological experiments that are either graduate students or people that subscribe to testing platforms such as Prolific Academy or Mechanical Turk.
That's very interesting. To the best of my recall, you already published one paper in the Nature Human Behavior, which relates to this intercultural decision making, right? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, this is exactly right, and this is why I'm mentioning that we are going to try to replicate the experiences because we already found the previous experience of this first study very rewarding in terms of what we gain in information. Maybe if I can just summarize a little bit the results, we used a different paradigm, so we was not a description plus experience paradigm as the one that I presented at the DEB seminar, but rather in a maybe more standard manner. What we did is that we administered to participants in 11 countries the same decision problems either in a described manner, but in that case it's pure description, or in a reinforcement learning or experience-based manner. And one of the key results, which I think is also very interesting for your community, or if I may say for our community, is that when you look at the cross-cultural stability of these findings, the findings pertaining the behavior in the experience-based or in the reinforcement learning task are much more stable across countries, while the results concerning the description-based paradigm are more variables, also highly multidimensional. So the determinants are complicated. But I think the interesting bit here is that probably experience-based tasks, they tap into more hard-coded, if I may say, or low-level processes that are largely shared the human population. If I may speculate, also with many animal species, right? Because at the end of the day, every animal engaged in a form of experience-based learning. While on the other side, the description relies on symbolic and also cultural constructs, right? For example, risk preferences is something that it is not valued the same in different culture. Risk preferences are also affected by mathematical proficiency, or for example, how probabilities are even being taught at school, right? So you can see that we were able precisely to show that essentially the description-based preferences are much more variable, while the experience-based elicited ones are more stable and cross-cultural stable.
That's excellent news for me to hear that what you are saying. So basically, what you're saying is that our paradigm is more stable, uh, especially nowadays when all the replicability crisis, etc., etc. In a sense, you find that the results are more stable than in the descriptive paradigm. And also, if I
Absolutely.
understand you correctly, Skinner was right in a sense regarding the
It's,
role
it's,
of
uh,
experience.
it's funny that you mentioned that
Sorry,
because I think
the incentives. Yeah. Mhm.
yeah, no, and I think that it is interesting because it is also important not to forget that Skinner was one of the first behavioral scientists that postulated the fact that research in behavioral sciences should be used to inform policy making, to design what they call the behavioral technologies. And now people may call them nudges or boosters or things like that. And I think one implication that you correctly identified about these findings that if you wanted to start designing, call them behavioral technologies, nudges, or boosters, you our findings suggest that chances are higher to have something that will work deployed internationally if it is based on findings of the experience-based paradigm, because the same process are much more cross-cultural stable. But on the other side, if you decide a nudge that is based on description-based theories, because of the higher variability across countries, there are less chances that it will work if deployed in two different countries.
I cannot agree more with you. And if I'm allowed to add, most of our experience, and I think you also mentioned it in your talk, are include experience. It's our experience, or at least we know experience of other people. So even if we have no experience with this particular restaurant, for example, we have experience with similar restaurants, so we know what to expect. So we are not making most of the decisions in purely descriptive environment.
I agree.
Okay, so let's move to the next question. If I understand correctly, you are the head of the Human Reinforcement Learning team at the École Normale Supreme. I'm sorry, I cannot pronounce it correctly. I give up.
It's
Super.
fine. Superior. It's okay.
Superior. Oh, eventually
Superior, if
I
you
will
want.
learn. Can you tell us, please, a little bit more about your laboratory and whatever you are looking for grad students, postdocs, etc.?
Yeah, so our laboratory, as the name suggests, as core research topic, reinforcement learning in humans. So essentially, we started by investigating probably like few more experience-based decision, and we started by understanding how reward are represented, are encoded using a combination of different techniques, mainly behavioral testing and computational modeling, but we are also interested in the neural basis. I have a background in neurobiology, where I studied the pharmacology and the functional magnetic imaging. And now, more recently, we are extending also to different different methods, more inspired by artificial intelligence research. It is actually a pretty, I would say, interdisciplinary environment. So our students, my students, come from quite different backgrounds. So you can have engineers, psychologists, economists, people coming from machine learning or biology. So you can see that basically we span a little bit, everywhere in the spectrum of what is standardly considered the cognitive sciences. And yeah, as you said, we are based on the École Normale Supérieure, which is one of the higher education institution in France. And our team is currently funded by the European Research Council and a couple of other French grants. And yeah, so we are always happy to receive interesting application by prospective students, either directly for the team or to join the graduate program proposed by the École Normale, and namely what we call the Cog Master, which is a master in cognitive science, which is, in my experience, since I teach there, it's always course of very brilliant students and people, the students say it's also a very good experience to study there.
And as a bonus, they have a chance to live in French, which is, in my opinion, adorable place to live in, right?
Yes, so precisely the university is in the very center of Paris. So every day going to the offices counts like a touristic tour of the city, essentially.
Wow, that's a huge bonus, especially for people like me who adore France. Okay, now we move on from your research to more general, perhaps, questions. And in your opinion, what is the most pressing issue nowadays in the social sciences?
Yeah, so for me, one of the most pressing issue in general in social science nowadays is try to find out to figure out a way how to move from the laboratory findings to real life applications. Okay, um, I wouldn't say that is a recent issue because it's an issue that has been identified many years ago. There is also an issue that maybe people sometimes too optimistically think that there's been solutions, right? For example, again, the nudge movement, or in general, think about the BIT-like application of behavioral science to policy making, etc. But I don't believe we are quite there, right? So we think we still have a problem, and the findings are somehow lost in translation from the laboratory. So you can have things that are very robust, reproducible, etc. But then you fail to see how these findings will be applied or can even be applied in real life. Be them application in political science, but also, for example, from psychology to clinical application. Okay, so I think essentially two main reasons, or maybe two angle of problems or angle of attacks of the problem. Right. The first one is that I conceive a continuum in between a theory that can be sometimes even expressed in verbal manner, doesn't need to be fully quantitative, and a model. And a model is something very concrete that you can even simulate, okay? But you know that from a very fuzzy theory to a very concrete model that you simulate, there are different levels of specification, right? The problem is that when you fit a model to behavioral data in the lab, you are at the bottom level, you're essentially at the model level. But the problem is that probably the parameters that you will extract in this artificial laboratory setting will not really recycle to real life. And that, I think, is one of the reasons that we are lost in transitions, that we don't know in the spectrum from theory to model when we should start translating and when we should start experimenting with real life things. Another problem, another barrier for this translation from the laboratory to application is represented by what I would say the problem of interindividual differences. Okay, so we all know that in our tasks we often capture a substantial interindividual variability in a metric of interest such as risk preferences, learning rate, etc., etc. Okay, a lot of potential application of psychology or behavioral research to real life, for example, could be to use these laboratory-based tools, for example, to profile the participants, better identify, for example, their preferences, and give better recommendation, or even better identify the propensity of these participants to develop a psychiatric disease, and therefore create an environment, maybe protect these participants, this person, these factors, etc. But the problem is that, and many people have provided robust evidence also in our lab, but also in other labs, for this problem, is that it is not clear whether the interindividual variability that we capture in the lab relate to interindividual difference and variability that we capture in the real life. And there are many reasons for this, including the fact that laboratory-based tasks are not designed to maximize the fact of capturing individual differences, but if anything, they are selected to be reproducible, so to minimize variance in a way, right? So there is also, I think, some important thinking to do about how better capture interindividual differences. And I think these two questions, so the question at which point from the theory to model spectrum we should deploy in the real life, and also sharpen the tools to better capture interindividual differences, are key challenges for the application of laboratory-based research to real life, which for me represent one of the most important issue of social science. So at which point we will be able to develop in a robust, continuative manner behavioral technologies, as is the same in chemistry, physics, etc., etc. Right?
I cannot agree more with you. And tell me, please, do I interpret your answer correctly or not? So first of all, you speak about the problem of external validity in a sense
Yes. Yeah.
in the
Yes.
lab experiments, and the second, what you suggest or what I infer you suggest is to integrate more um, field studies with lab studies, or perhaps maybe this is one of the solutions to take what we learn in the lab and use it in the field studies to see if it indeed replicate or if we can use our insights from the lab to the field.
Exactly, because for maybe I don't know if it is the good example, right? But let's say, imagine that people say that in the lab the value, the loss aversion parameter is 2.1, right? But that's the value that you get with the lottery-based task in the lab. It's a very long shot to start thinking about a policy intervention or a clinical intervention that is based on this very specific value estimate of the parameter, which depends, of course, on the true loss aversion, but also on the contextuality of the task, right? Actually, I agree with you. Translating experiment or analysis or study with real life data, as soon as it's done, as soon as we get to the idea that, okay, maybe this is the model, but you have to parameterize differently, because there is, of course, always an adjustment of the model parameters, or even to some extent of the model structure, to the material setup that make up the real life decisions.
I agree with you. And what is your vision for our community 10 years from now? You asked before that, so you're definitely part of our community. Now you're in a DEB seminar, which is the core of the community. Just joking. But what is your vision for us?
Yeah. So first of all, yeah, thanks for admitting me in the community. So as you said, I've always worked more or less in decision making by experience, but started with a different background. So I'm very happy to learn from you, to interact with you. Um, yeah, so what I'm gonna say concerning the vision for our community, I know it's gonna be a little bit cheesy, and maybe more than a vision is a wish, but I think that we should all gain from even more integration in the terms of cross-disciplinary integration, right? So, for example, I gained a lot from the neuroeconomics, neuroscience literature, started reading the behavioral and decision-making literature, and now I'm gaining a lot, for example, from started reading for artificial intelligence. But I think that there is a continuity. I mean, even the fact that people like me can make this path means that there is room for integration. And I believe that there has been a lot of step in this direction. And for example, coming again from the neuroscience point of view, there is a huge difference in the perception of purely behavioral research in the span of the last 10 years, right? So for example, even more concretely, very few neuroscientists would have said, okay, let's say a behavioral study just quote unquote with computational model without a neuroscience component. But now myself and a lot of colleagues have completely accepted that the behavior per se is interesting enough object of study to justify behavioral pure studies as the one I presented, right? On the other side, for example, that so if I can share some anecdotes, I tried to collaborate and even publish or submitting in economics journal, but I still find it very difficult. So there is a sort of communitarism in certain fields. So my wish would be to keep going with this idea that at the end um, we are all people interested in decision making. We are not economists, psychologists, neuroscientists, artificial intelligence researcher, right? So that's for me the twist. The twist is that the object of the field should be decision making research. So if I may clarify myself, and within decision making research, there will be different approach. So that's my vision and also my wish concerning our community.
And I completely agree with you. I also think that some of the barriers are very artificial, and people in our community are from very different backgrounds, and it helps us all. And
Yeah, sometimes are essentially sociological barrier. That's the things I realized. Are not intellectual, scientific, almost not even methodological. However, of course, there are different methodological traditions, right? But the barrier often is more the sociological, the network that you have. So, for example, your initiative is great because I've seen that among your speakers, we have also a quite good diversity, different backgrounds, and they really encourage you to diversify even more, maybe to integrate neuroscientists, etc. To add something to this very positive trend.
but by the way, the second point you mentioned economics. So my cynical point is that sometimes the barriers are created not artificially but intentionally because of the incentive structures. So in
Yes,
different countries, in different departments, you get a completely different salary. So if you have a way higher salary in, let's say, business school, so you have to make barriers to not allow people outside of your community not to enter the community, which might be a problem, but this is one of the reasons, I think, for these barriers and the difficult to publish in economic journals, for example. Or
I
maybe
perfectly
currently,
agree.
yeah, go
Exact,
ahead.
no, exactly what I mentioned by sociological problem is institutional problem. Yeah, so I completely agree with you. It's
Or some
misplaced incentives and structures.
Yes, and in universities which accept only publications from top four journals in their specific
Mm.
field, doesn't matter which field, which makes a lot of pressure on the scholars to publish there. Um, okay, and what is, in your opinion, the most impressive finding from the last, let's say, 10 years or so? I will not
Yeah,
count back.
that's also very good and of course very difficult question. So I would say two things, right? It's okay. Maybe it's not none of the two is really a finding, right? But I think in the last 10 years, one of the most impressive things that happens is the replication crisis in psychology. Okay, so actually the replication crisis existed before. So what I'm calling here the impressive things is that the raising awareness of this through the Open Science Framework Initiative, the science paper, etc., etc. And I think this is really a turning point in our field, right? So now, for example, it's almost unacceptable to publish non-replicated studies. At least for me, it is not possible, right? So we always have a multiplication of the experiment to ensure that you are in a good reproducibility. Now it is impossible or almost impossible not to share the data, which was probably already the customary in behavioral science and economics, but not much in neuroscience, etc., etc. So I think that this the gaining of this awareness and all the related modification in the ethos, in the methods, and in how behavioral science is carry on now, it's one of the most impressive and long-lasting events. And as the second thing, I will focus on something that is comparatively much more recent. And for me, it entered in my life, in my scientific life, a couple of years ago. it has the invention, so it's not a discovery, it's the invention of large language models. So this new technology of artificial intelligence, such as very famous GPT or ChatGPT or Gemini, etc., etc. And I think they will also make a very strong, they're already making an impact, and I think they will make a very strong impact in behavioral sciences at two levels. So first of all, as tools, we are already looking how, for example, they can be used, that they can popularize things that were otherwise complicated, such as natural language processes. They will also generate essentially stimuli context for brand new science of human machine interaction that of course existed before, but it will reach a scale that is not comparable to the scale that we've seen before. And lastly, they are also interesting because they are complex enough that they will become for us also object of study, right? So, and for example, in the lab is not a major line of research, and we are not alone. Other labs elsewhere, we actually try to recycle concepts from psychology, cognitive science to understand how they work. And the reason why you can, to some extent, recycle our tools is, first of all, because they are their behavior is complex enough that they can essentially uh, be considered multitasking, right? So you can do a reinforcement learning task through a large language model, you can do a decision making under risk task, etc., etc. And then the other factor is that they are black boxes, a bit like the brain is a black box. But don't be mistaken, here I'm not making the claim. I'm pretty neutral on the fact I don't think necessarily that they are good model of the human brain, but they are nonetheless some sort of artificial brain. This is complex enough, and we can gain. And I think that in the future, this will become more of an established field of research with dedicated journals, dedicated conferences, etc., etc. We're already seeing that. So it will also create a long-lasting impact in our field.
I see. It somewhat recall me from again from your presentation. Can you predict without understanding? If sorry, if you
Yes,
have a good prediction, can you have is helpful with understanding? So it relates in a sense to the issue of the black box, which you now
exactly.
mentioned. Um, yes, and I completely agree with you regarding the in a way maybe it's a paradigm shift in all what's happening with all these natural language models, etc., etc. As a very accomplished, and you yourself, if I'm allowed to say, look very young. So as a very accomplished and young scholar, what is your advice for even younger and less accomplished scholars as for now, specifically for grad students?
Yeah, first of all, thanks a lot for the compliment. Always a pleasure to be called young. But so, what would be my advice? Um, be very careful in the choice of the research topic. I think it is very important that you find something that make you happy to wake up in the morning and going in the lab and do this 8 hours straight. Um, I did something that, for example, I can I don't know, I did it on my skin in the sense that, my original undergraduate study, my master's degree was in pharmaceutical biotechnology. So something really light years away what I do now. And took my time to understand that this was not things that I wanted to do, study again, coming back and finally, progressively find a home, an intellectual home, studying things that made me happy. And even when this was done to some extent during the my PhD study, as you can see, we were discussing also about that. I There is always a drift, a change, right? So every day, ask yourself, what are you excited about, right? So do not really think that at some point you are close. So you have the key of success. It's to success, or even the key of happiness, maybe to some extent, is to be able to say, yeah, this is really interesting in me. I want to spend time to think about it. And then maybe something a little bit less popular that I'm gonna say, because generally, especially on the internet, etc. Sort of complaining how hard is the life in research. But I think we should not lose sight of the immense privilege that we have as workers, intellectual workers in academia. Granted, there are a lot of difficulties, things are sometimes painful, etc., etc. But at the end of the day, if um, for me, I would say the best job in the world, and of course, it's relative to what is your scale of value. So if you value learning, well, it's I think almost the only one of the few jobs in the world in which you actually get paid to learn every day new things and push even the boundaries of knowledge, right? And it is true that also sometimes you may find uh, tough environment, not the right colleagues, etc. But I think again, do not lose sight that in general it is a work environment that is populated by interesting and good person, and try a little bit not to have a negativity bias, but a positivity bias about what we are doing.
I cannot agree more with all of what you said. First of all, I think your advice regarding finding the things that you are excited about, this is a generally excellent advice. Also for non-academic people, exactly to be a happy person, like find the jobs that you are happy with, not only that gives you enough money. So I completely agree with this advice, and I also completely agree that we are blessed to have the probably the best work in the world, because another advantage that we have is the freedom. Like as you said, you are not,
Yeah,
if you are not happy with what you are doing, so you can start a different line of research. You can collaborate with different people. There is no other work in which you have so much freedom to do what you like and also get paid for that, as in
yeah,
uh, our work. So we are
absolutely.
coming towards the end of our very interesting interview, at least for me. And my last question for you today is, which book would you recommend us to read?
Yeah, so I would recommend two books. One is more science oriented. It's a book written by psychologist Alan Parducci. The title is quite long. It's Happiness, Pleasure, and Judgment: The Contextual Theory and Its Application. And essentially, Parducci is someone that formalized very well the fact that perception and judgment is context dependent, which is a fundamental concept in economics, with influence in psychophysics, in economics, and even in neuroscience. And the way I recommend this book is that, yeah, first of all, because the theory is sound, but it also because the author, I think, is the book is written in a way that is uh, to some extent also autobiographical, very engaging. And while you learn a lot about his research and his science, you also get to see, get to feel the excitement of this scientist vis-a-vis of his research and his findings, and how he could himself apply his findings specifically related to happiness to real life and to his own life. So for me, it's a very rare case in which um, you can read a book that is full of scientific content, very solid one, but it's also very autobiographical and very concrete. And the second book that I want to advise, and it's just by recency bias because it's the last book that I finished reading last week, it's not a science book. It's a novel by Marguerite Yourcenar. The French title is The Abyss. In French is L'Œuvre Noire. And I want to advise this. I want to suggest this first of all because it is written in a magnificent language, and when we read the science is often written in a very functional, sometimes dry language because the idea is to vehiculate some content in a manner that is very clear. Um, but it's important also to read actual literature, to read some texts that even in a billion years GPT will never be able to write, right? Because there is genius, there is art, and particularly the topic of this book, it is extremely interesting because it strikes a huge balance between historical accuracy, is an historical novel about the time that patient me, which is essentially the scientific revolution. Um, the Renaissance, essentially, but also psychological depth of the protagonist and the human relationship. So, concern, it is important to be passionate of what you do as a scientist, but not to forget that you also need a different kind of intellectual nourishment in your life. And Marguerite Yourcenar, The Abyss is a great read.
Indeed, you have to be patient as a scientist because it takes time to publish anything. So I think it was my great pleasure to speak with you. And Stefano, thank you for this very interesting interview. And I hope to see you in our next talks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Efim, to you and the community. And yeah, we'll be in touch. Bye.